Well, but under the Constitution, Mr Mubarak can still sack both the government and the parliament. Let's get more now on the situation in the capital. Let's go to journalist Ian Lee in Cairo. Ian, do I understand, are you near the Al-Qaid Ibrahim Mosque? Is that the mosque that you're near?
I'm near the El Noor Mosque right now, and there's demonstrators, hundreds of demonstrators who are marching. They're family members of those who have died. They're marching to Tahrir Square right now. They just finished Friday prayer, and they're marching right now to Tahrir Square.
Describe for us the atmosphere. Is there a sense of anger that you're seeing or feeling there?
Definitely people are angry here. You know, the army made their concessions, but people are still demanding that President Hosni Mubarak step down as president. You know, we aren't seeing anything change from these demonstrations.
Okay. Well, we want to bring in our analysts here right now, our people who can bring some voice to this discussion. We've got Nima El-Bagher and John Defterius here. John, let me talk to you about this. We're seeing these thousands of crowds, but let's bring into perspective why these crowds started protesting in the first place. There's high unemployment in this country. Now that the president is saying, okay, he's not leaving, but he's promising all these reforms. We heard from the finance minister saying that this national employment program will be set up. But the reality is people don't care anymore what they're going to say.
Well, there's a near and short-term challenge here and a long-term challenge. The long-term challenge is something you brought up, is that the unemployment rate is nearly 10% already. Amongst the youth, it's probably around 20 to 25%, so that's a powder keg anyway, and that, as you say, is why we got here. Now, the other challenge that we've had in the near term is that having seen all the protests and then the swells of people in the square, workers are walking off the jobs in the main industries in Egypt right now, so ceramics, textiles, agriculture, steel. They downed their tools this week, and some of the business people I spoke to said that up to 10% of the population of 80 million people have hit the streets, either in protest or in industrial action. And the government was trying to put some money on the table here and say, here's a 3% increase, here's a 5% increase. You know, go back to work. You heard the vice president saying the same thing last night. Come on, go back to work right now. And they said, that's not good enough. So it goes back to the point you were making. The hostility on the ground is very, very intense. And we heard from the military just over an hour ago. I think this is crucial. People haven't been talking about what is going to be the future role of the military. Do they follow Mr. Suleiman? Do they follow Mr. Mubarak? Or do they start to define their own role going forward? I mean, they represent about 10 to 15% of the economy on its own. The Field Marshal and General, Mr. Tatwawi, does he start to define, look, we're going to secure the people here. We will lift the emergency law in time, but we do promise we're going to do it. We'll clean up the parliamentary seats that were in dispute before. And can we make this presidential election a smooth one so we can get back to this concept of money coming back into the country? And this is a huge, big if over the next 5 to 6 months.
Nima, a lot of discussion has been saying about what is going on inside Mr. Mubarak's head at this point. He is a man who's been in power for the last 30 years. We're seeing there right now, the thousands on the streets saying they want him out. That doesn't matter what amendments to the Constitution he's going to be making, who he puts in power. They just don't want him there anymore. It's hard to, I guess, be inside the mind of someone like that, but from a leader like that, what do you think, what could you make of what his stance is?
And what's interesting with Hosni Mubarak is he's not like Zain al-Abidine bin Ali. He's not like the Tunisian premier. He's not some world-traveling sophisticate. He is at heart, you know, he is an Egyptian boy, a son of the soil, as they call it in Egypt. He's a war hero. You know, he has always felt that everything that he has done has been in the interest of Egypt's greater security. You know, in Arabic they say Masrum ad-dunya. Egypt is the mother not just of the Middle East, but of the entire world. And he, I think, seems to have convinced himself. I mean, speaking to a lot of the people that are close, I mean, I don't think anybody can claim to be close to the president at this point, because he seems to be isolated even from the Supreme Military Council. He was interestingly not involved in any of their meetings over the last few days.
But he wasn't involved in the meetings this morning with the military.
Or yesterday, or the continuing leadership meeting of the General Leadership Council. But people who have been close to him in the past say that he genuinely has convinced himself that, you know, he is the caretaker of Egypt. And if he goes, all this security that he has been working on from the Arab-Israeli war, this is all going to collapse. And it's interesting that you were also talking about, you know, the sense of anger and the sense that people feel they've been conned. And that's because they have been. Omar Suleiman has been for years being built up since 2003, 2004. He's been taking a more public role. He's been meeting with visiting foreign ministers to take over as vice president, because this vice presidential role has been empty for a while, to take over as president and then subsequently to be Mubarak's successor. So people really feel like we haven't been out on the streets for 2 weeks for you to do what you've been planning to do for all these years. And even under the Egyptian constitution itself, it's a con. Because if the president were to divest his powers to anyone, it would be to the speaker. And then there would be elections within 60 days.
Well, there's quite a dispute about that. Temporarily handing over power, which he's doing, or is it going to be a long-term handover of power? You make a phenomenal point. Mr. Suleiman has had his eyes on the job for a long, long time, and behind the scenes for the last 4 or 5 years. Was it going to be Mr. Suleiman or Gamal Mubarak? So we had the answer to that in the last 2 weeks, because Gamal has now stepped out of the picture. So that's one interesting side here. But the other side of the point, the Ministry of Interior, apparently there was an uproar about 10 days ago internally, because they were being asked to use force on the streets. And there was a revolt, and the military apparently settled the dispute. So this is a lot of discussion with people on background here. But going forward, as you see the protests on the street right now, who's going to prevail here? The Ministry of Interior or the military going forward? And I think the people on the ground would say they feel more secure with the military.
At the end of the day, though, they also have been asking for a civilian government, not a military government, one that's ruled by the military, where they are the ones calling the shots. They want a civilian type government. But again, as we're seeing there live on as we're seeing there on our screens right now on this Friday, thousands of people have gathered onto the square, Tahrir Square, also known as Liberation Square, to demand that Mr. Mubarak leave office now, regardless of what he had said last night to his people in a televised address on state television, Egyptian state television, that he was promising reforms, he was promising that there will be changes that will be made, and that he was promising that his vice president will be taking over as taking over powers. But again, those powers have still yet to be really defined, and whether or not Mr. Mubarak still maintains overall power, that again has to be clarified. Now, the U.S. government did make a statement after Mr. Mubarak's address. President Barack Obama says the Egyptian government must put forward a credible, concrete, and unequivocal path toward genuine democracy. He added the violence must be forsaken, and that Egypt has changed and its future is in the hands of the people. Well, so far, the U.S. has consistently said that Egypt's future is in the hands of Egyptians, but critics say beyond that, the Obama administration is sending mixed messages